Well, it was interesting talking to John Wong today, the pastor over in Huntington Beach. And he said, man, a really strange thing happened. He just started the church last September. And he goes, I'm going through Genesis, and I told everybody, hey, get ready. I'm going to teach the first 3 to 5 chapters tonight. And we didn't get even out of chapter 1. And then I told him, okay, now we're going to get to chapter 2 and we didn't even get out of chapter 2. And finally, it just dawned on me, the Lord's got a different timing with us going through the Bible this time. He's a very experienced pastor as well. And I said, the same thing happened to me. Exactly. So, it's encouraging to hear that it is the Lord that's leading us slowly. But I guess he's like, hey, it's right on time. So I'm trying, guys. I'm trying to get there quicker, but I think the Lord's got it all worked out. Well, we had some wild and crazy stories in chapter 11 where the people murmured and Moses had a bit of a breakdown. They chose 70 leaders that we're going to find out are not helpful. But then Moses said, God, please, I'm seeing my wretchedness. And God said, go tell them I'm going to give them meat for a month. And Moses, what am I supposed to do? Catch all the fish out of the ocean? That wouldn't be enough. And God said, Moses, I didn't get weaker along the way. My arm didn't get shorter. Just go tell them. And Moses thought that's going to be the kill shot. If I tell them that, they don't get the meat that God promised. And of course, the quails started coming in. They started batting them down, and they had just laid out all around the miles and miles of the about 2 to 3 million Jews. It was crazy. And of course, they choked on it, many of them. And then chapter 12, remember, Miriam and Aaron said, hey, Moses, we're tired of you acting like you're really the only guy in charge when we are equally in charge. And by the way, we could spill the beans on you about your Ethiopian wife that nobody knows about, evidently. And that's going against Levitical law that you said we're not to intermarry with other. And so anyway, we talked about that as well. Well, the leaders come to Moses and say, let's get this show on the road. Let's get on over to the promised land. So if you are walking from Egypt, from where they were at, in Goshen there, and you were to walk straight to the southern border of Israel, they say maximally, it would take you 11 days. So, but you got 2-3 million people with old people and babies and tents and the tabernacle and all these things. I got a feeling it was probably very slow moving with this group, but very powerful moving as well. So in verses 1 through 3, the Lord spoke to Moses saying, send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving the children of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every man a leader among them. So Moses sent them from among the wilderness of Paran, according to the command of the Lord, all of the men who were heads of the children of Israel. Now, take a note in Numbers 13 and turn over to Deuteronomy chapter 1. So in Numbers, it says that the Lord spoke to Moses and send out spies into the land of Canaan and do all of this. But we come to Deuteronomy 1, and it's repeating a lot of what's happened in the past, but with a different insight. And in Deuteronomy chapter 1, starting there in verse 19, it says, so we departed from Horeb and went through all of the great terrible wilderness, which you saw on the way of the mountains of the Amorites, and the land of our God had commanded us. Then we came to Kadesh Barnea. Now we're going to find out that where they're at right now in the wilderness of Paran, just a little bit south, is in the wilderness of Sin, and they stop at Kadesh Barnea. This is important. That's why I put that verse in there. But really, I want to talk to you on down. And I said to you, you come to the mountains of the Amorites, which the Lord your God is giving. Look, the Lord your God has set the land before you. Go up, possess it, as the Lord God of your fathers has spoken to you. Do not fear or be discouraged. Verse 22 now of Deuteronomy 1. And every one of you came near to me and said, let us send men before us. Let them search out the land for us. Bring back word to us of the way by which we should go up, and of the cities into which we shall come. The plan pleased me well. So I looked, and the 12 men and 1 man from each tribe, and they departed and went up to the mountains and came to the valley of Eshcol and spied it out. That'd be the last place they go on their return. And also they took some of the fruit of the land with their own hands and brought it down and brought back to us, saying, it is a good land which the Lord our God is giving us. And so what we learn here is, and we will go through this a lot in the Bible, especially between the Kings and the Chronicles. The Kings is written from a human point of view, and the Chronicles does the same stories, but from a heavenly point of view. And that's sort of what we're getting here. So evidently, even though it says in Numbers 13, the Lord spoke and do this, that we're going to discover here that really isn't the way it happened like before, when God said, Moses, come up on the mountain, and or that kind of thing. So actually, can we shut that door? So actually, what we have going is this. It appears that the children of Israel are getting excited, and they're like, hey, let's go in and possess it. Maybe Moses had preached a sermon on let's go possess the land. And they were excited about it, and maybe Moses didn't go and ask God, do we go or not go? Maybe he said, how shall we go? What do you think? And evidently, he's letting them know now in Deuteronomy, this was your idea. And now looking back at it, it was a bad idea. Now, I realize I was excited for you. And God didn't give us a no. And actually, the Lord said, this is a plan that I want you to go ahead and do this plan. But we're going to find this a lot in the scripture, where Jesus had it right when he said, when you pray, pray, not my will, but your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And so there is a sense, Proverbs 16 says, the man plans his way and the Lord will direct his path. So there's a sense we just go through our day regularly and we see God giving us divine appointments and leading every step of our way. But what we have here is God testing. And he's going to later say in Deuteronomy, the whole desert experience was purely a testing experience. For 40, we're going to find 40 is the number of testing. They're going to be 40 spies, or the spies are going to be 40 days in the land of Israel. And so he said, I'm going to test you there to see what's in your heart, or for you to see also what's in your heart. And I think it's one of these things. I think that's what we're observing here. Because God had told them way back in Exodus, I'm going to look at it here in a minute, but he repeatedly said, it's a good land. It's a land flowing with milk and honey. And I will give it to you. I promise you, God said, that I will take you out of Egypt and take you in to the promised land. I, the Lord, will do this. But we're going to find the entire time through Numbers, every time the people speak, they'll say, yes, God promised us a good land flowing with milk and honey. But they never finish the verse. The Lord said that he would do it for us. He would do it for us. He's the one who would do it, not us ourselves. Do it for us. God would do it for us. I will give you the land. And so, you look at Moses. I mean, God was constantly setting up Moses in test. Way back when they first started, when the golden calf happened, remember? God said, Moses, I'm getting rid of them. Everybody, and you're, forget Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You're the new Abraham. We're starting from scratch. There had to be a moment going, Father Abraham, whoa, I have my own, be the patriarch of my own country, or whatever. But then quickly he's like, no, you can't destroy these people. What are the Egyptians going to say? They said, actually, they won't last very long in the desert. Not because of the desert, because God's going to kill them because they're such a rotten, stubborn people. And so you can't do it. And we're going to see similar words here with Moses next week in chapter 14. But so, and then you see Moses being tested with them wanting meat. And Moses was tested and sort of had a breakdown there and saying, I can't give meat to these people. And if I were to catch all the fish of the ocean, it wouldn't be enough. And it's an impossible situation. I can't do this anymore. You got to take the burden off me, God. And it was a pressing, a testing. And so really these 12 spies going into the land was indeed indirectly planned by God to test them. So ultimately, was it God's will that these 12 spies go in? Yes. Was it something that God, according to Deuteronomy 1, would have suggested for them? No. But they suggested it. It pleased Moses well, and therefore God said, go. That's the process of what we read between Numbers and Deuteronomy. Now, later on, just to give you an insight, when God did say to send spies in, how many did they send in? 2, not 12. And that was probably wiser at this point, too. Just 2 guys, Caleb and Joshua, nobody else. And so it's an interesting story here as we compare it to Deuteronomy chapter 1. Again, in verse 21, he says, look, the Lord your God set the land before you. Go up and possess it, as the Lord God of your fathers has spoken to you. Do not fear, do not be dismayed. So Moses saw their faith, and he thought it was their faith. We're going to discover it wasn't. Of them saying, we're excited, man. We want to go over there and check it out. We can't wait to see, the new land, the new house, the new farm, the new hills and the valleys and the rivers, and we can't wait to go see it. That's a human thing, isn't it? And he said to them, yeah, go possess your, that's the right kind of talk. Go possess your possessions. That is your land. That isn't the Amalekites. That was given to Abraham. Now, none of his kids have been on that for 400 years. Doesn't mean anything. 400 years? 4,000 years. It wouldn't matter. That land is Abraham's land and to his descendants. So you just need to go over and claim it. Ezekiel points this out in chapter 20, verse 6, where he said, my hand gave the oath to bring you out and bring you in. And then again in Deuteronomy 1:22, every one of you came near to me and said, let us send men before us. So really was sort of a leadership talking, and they brought this to Moses. Let them search out the land for us. Bring back word to us by which way we should go up. And the cities into which we shall come. So it sounds like they're like, we need to start making some plans here. We need to start laying out some maps and get some geographical surveys done and figure out the best way to, but of course, is that going to ever work out to figure out which way they'd go? Later on, Joshua tried that on Jericho, and God said, no, I'm the commander of the Lord's army as well as your Lord, and I've got my own battle plan, and this is where you're going to go. And really, it's sort of foolish because They were going wherever the pillar of cloud went, right? It wasn't up to them. But we see in the midst of this where they're like, God may not come through for us. So we better make a plan that will be a successful plan in case God doesn't come through for us. Well, in verse 4 through 16, they lay out the people that will go from each tribe. Now, it's much easier to read this when you lay it out in a graph like I've given you here. And so we see that Shammua, of the tribe of Judah, Shaphat of the tribe of Simeon. But notice I put in bold here, Caleb, the tribe of Judah, the kingly tribe eventually, Eagle of the tribe of Issachar, and then Hoshea, which we're going to see Moses in a minute change his name to Joshua, the tribe of Ephraim. That would be the largest, most powerful tribe in Israel throughout its history. Palti of Benjamin, Gadel from Zebulun, Gadi from Manasseh, Amil from the tribe of Dan, Suther from the tribe of Asher, Nebi from the tribe of Naphtali, and Gul from the tribe of Gad. Now, the name Caleb is very close, if not identical, to the Hebrew word dog. That was what his parents named him, dog. Now, we often, in our English mindset, we immediately think the negative of calling somebody a dog. That sort of means you're ugly or mean or something. But if you think about it in the positive terms, can you tell me a better creature on earth that God has made than a dog? I mean, truly, the dog is man's best friend. And that thing is happy to see you every morning when you wake up, happy to see you, when you come in from work or wherever you come from. They want to sit right on top of you all the time. They can sense if you just need to be comforted, and they know how to snuggle with you to comfort you. They'll do anything they can to protect you, even if they're only 5 inches long. Yeah, dog. A dog truly, all things are made in the image of God. And, we look at a giant waterfall and realize there's aspects of that giant waterfall that speak of God's nature. Look at the vastness of space and to realize God's ways, God's thoughts are higher than our thoughts. The sides of heavens are above the earth. But, when you look at a dog, it really, truly is, worldwide, a special creature. Especially in Haiti, because they can also eat them. No, they don't. No, they do not eat them. I asked Bryan, I said, come on, Bryan, do the Haitians eat the dogs and the cats? Is that what's going on over there in Illinois? And he goes, Bryan, I have lived in Haiti for however many decades he's lived in Haiti. He goes, I've never seen a cat. They eat the cats. For sure, they eat the cats. But he goes, I've never, ever heard of any Haitian eating a dog. And I'm like, that sounds about right. When I see a cat, I don't necessarily want to do anything. I don't want to eat it, but I sure don't want to treat it like a dog either. So anyway, and then Moses called Hoshea, the son of Nun. It's not a virgin birth, and that's not a Catholic nun. That's just happens to sound similar to our English. But Joshua, so, I think the conversation went something like, hi there, who are you? And he says, I'm salvation. I'm Hoshea, salvation. And Moses is like, okay, we're going to fix that right now. We're going to put the tetragrammaton in front of your name, the YHWH, the Yah, and then you can have the Hoshea. And it as you squish it together, it comes out like Yahshua, Yahosea, Yahoshua, or Joshua, or in the Greek, Jesus. So God is your salvation. Don't just say salvation like there's some arbitrary salvation that's out there to exist of the brotherhood of humans or something. No, you need God to be your salvation. Well, verse 17 now to verse 20. So Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan and said to them, go up in the way into the south and go up into the mountains. Now I want to stop here for a moment, and I've got a number of, I got about 20 maps to show you tonight, but I'm hoping to find, I couldn't find one good one, so I found a bunch of bad ones, and hopefully it'll turn into one good one. But so what we have here, go back to that last map. So what we have is Egypt over here, right? This is where we have Egypt. And they're coming south. And here now they're leaving the wilderness of Paran, and now they're entering into the wilderness of Sin. And they end up at a place, we're going to find out in just a few verses, they're going to say Kadesh, but in Deuteronomy, it makes it clear it's Kadesh Barnea. And that is the location, and that becomes a very sacred place down the road with Israel. And so they're in this area here is where they move to the camp and the spies go out. And they go up this way. Later, this would be Jerusalem here. Hebron. I got it on another map. And then they go up. This is the Dead Sea here. Then the Jordan River. And this is the Sea of Galilee. And then you go up. Dan is the farthest of the borders because Tyre is Lebanon, right? And Damascus is Syria. So Dan is about the border to this day. And there's Abraham lived there for a while, and there is a giant gate door that still is in existence. And that dates back during the time of Abraham. It's the oldest gate in the world. And it goes back to the time of Abraham. But also right there is another place a little ways from that gate where they put up the golden calf during Jeroboam's reign, who reigned after Solomon, Jeroboam and Rehoboam. Remember, he made 2 golden calves so they wouldn't go back. And that's at Dan also. But it appears they went past, which later this will be part of the promised land, and they went all the way up into what would be Lebanon and Syria, up into this area. This would be the farthest they actually go, okay? And then I'll show you on another map, but you got Edom, and you got the Amorites and the Amalekites. And so, oh, here it is. Edom right here, Moab, and right up here is, well, Ammon, the Ammonites. So I've driven all through here, and it's really amazing to do that. Now, what I want to do is I want to stop here a minute. I still want to point at this map. So hang on just a minute there, Josh. I want to try to help you visualize this. Now, it just so happens that Israel is about the same size as Southern California. And what's interesting is when you go and you come out of a plane, you think you're in California. It is identical in so many ways. And the terrain, the weather, it's an identical match. And so, if you were to take a map of Southern California and lay it on top of Israel, you would be amazed how similar they are. So, if we think this is Mexico, okay, right down here, and they're coming down from Mexico, which is where Egypt would be, and they get here to the border where Tijuana, okay, would be in this area, and they go just a little ways, and they're at Bethlehem. A little further, they're at Jerusalem. But in this case, it's interesting that we have the Salton Sea, where, not identical, but very similar to where they have the Dead Sea. Now, if you follow the Jordan River up to Galilee, that's where we have Big Bear. Now, the big difference is the Dead Sea is the lowest spot on Earth, about 1,600 feet below sea level, depending on how deep it is at the time. And then Galilee, of course, the Big Bear is what? 5,000. Big Bear Lake is 5,000 feet above elevation, where the Sea of Galilee is the lowest freshwater on planet Earth, at about 800 feet below sea level. And so inland from here, Dan would be, right, if you go a little closer this way, that's where Disneyland would be, right about where Tyre is, okay? So it's not a perfect example, but it's very similar. But the point I'm hoping to make here is that you can now visualize it a little better as the spies are going. Does that help you? So we're going from south to north. This is the Mediterranean, not the Pacific Ocean, but it's on the west, just like the Pacific Ocean is for us. And then you've got the border, which this would be Arizona, and then you have the Mexico, which would be the Sinai Desert, and then eventually down to Egypt. Okay? So I don't know if that helps you or not.
It helped me.
Did it help you a lot, Ann? I'm glad, because your family called me and asked me if I could help you. So now I can tell them that I did. So it helped me when I heard that and understood that. So anyway, they go from the south, they're going up to the mountains. When you go to Jerusalem, it's about 3,000 feet in elevation. And you really have no other mountains until you get to the very end, past Dan, and that's the Golan Heights. And you get, I don't know how high that goes. Anybody know? Offhand, I think maybe 5,000, I don't know. But anyway, going on to verse 18, and see what the land is like, whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, few or many. This is Moses giving them instructions. Whether the land they dwell in is good or bad. Interesting. What's going on here? Is it Moses wanting them to identify how good the land is? Like God said, it's a good land. It's flowing with milk and honey. But maybe he's thinking if they see it for themselves, then they'll know that God's word is true. And what God said about the land being good, God would also say that you could get the promise that he's going to fight for you and bring you into the land. So hopefully you could calculate 2 + 2 = 4 and see if it's a good land. Of course, it's not going to be a bad land. It's going to be an amazing land. Do they have cities? Do they have camps or strongholds? Whether the land is rich or poor, whether there's forest there or not. And then he just says, be of good courage. I just picture Moses laughing and excited for them. Bring some of the fruit of the land back. Now, the time of the season was the first ripe grapes. Now, I actually grew up in Central California, and one of the places I lived outside of Fresno, every direction where we lived on a 2-story house. You go to the second story, far as you could see in any direction is grapevines. And I worked for farmers and crop dusters, and I trimmed them, and I picked them, and the farmer would tell me to stop doing that, but that was a whole nother story. But it was just amazing amount of grapes. And I happen to know that you harvest them at the end of July into August. That's the latest. So that's the time of year. It's hot. It's a hot time of year in Israel. But it's also the time where the grapes are ready to pick, and how good that will be. Now in Exodus 3:8, remember God said to them, I'll bring you up from the land, in a good and large land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of, God tells them, the Canaanites. I know you have enemies there. And there are a lot of enemies. The Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites. This is in Exodus 3:8. I'm just quoting out of that passage. You guys have Exodus memorized when we went through it, I know. And then also, he says this again in Exodus 13:5, a perfect repeat. And he lets them know again, I swore to give this to you and your fathers. And that's what's going to happen. And so whether the people are strong or weak, does that really matter? Boy, that was not a good idea. And we know from Numbers 11 that it was the 20th day of the second month. Remember when they left Sinai and started to move? And it had been a year and a month. so that you can calculate back to when they left Egypt and so forth. Well, verse 21 to 25 here. So they went up and they spied out the land from the wilderness of Zin, far as Rehob, near the entrance of Hamath. Now that would be Damascus. Most people believe today Hamath. Rehob, not sure exactly where that's at. The wilderness of Sin is right smack dab connected to Paran, and I think which part is the wilderness of Sin, which part is Paran, we don't know. And they went up through the south, I showed you that, and they first came to Hebron. We're going to cover that. You guys remember Hebron, by the way? Yes. What was Hebron? Yeah, no, what was the story of Hebron? It's the only actual piece of land that Abraham owned. Remember, he bought that cave and he buried his wife there. No mention of that here. You would have thought, hey, stop by Abraham's burial spot. No mention of that kind of here. Then a couple of places that we're not really sure, the Hyman, the Shishai, and the Talmai. These are descendants of the Anak, which means long-necked people, but referring that they are from the Nephilim. We're going to look at that for a minute. Now, Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. Now, this is an interesting little insight. As we've discovered, where this is today, Zoan is in what if you were to go to Egypt today, you would go to Tanis. And in Tanis, if you remember in the Raiders of the Lost Ark, Tanis is where they found the ark. Remember the Germans, they had to fight over it. Anyway, that's where that was. It was built around 1730 BC. And they estimate that Hebron was built 300 years earlier. So a couple of things on this, One, Zoan was not known by the normal person. They have discovered that it was a secret burial place that they had hidden within Egypt, and nobody would know about it. The average person wouldn't know about that. But it was a royal, only the royalty went there. But who else would know about that? Who would know the year? Who would know the secret place? How about a king's son of Egypt? Moses. He would have had that privy information. And not only did he have that privy information about that, but he also knew that, the Egyptians that you guys were so afraid of, and you're thinking, man, their lineage goes back far farther than anything, the Martians came down and helped them to build the pyramids and all this. Well, let me tell you, 300 years before that, they were building in Hebron when the Nile was just wild land around the Nile down there. And then they came finally to the valley of Eshcol, right next to Hebron there. And on their way out, they cut down the branch with one cluster of grapes. They carried it between two of them on a pole. And they brought some of the pomegranates and figs. The place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster. That's what Eshcol means, cluster, which the men of Israel cut down there. And they returned from spying out of the land at 40 days. So they went, keep going there, yeah. Okay, this is a really good map. We're going to come back to it later, though. Keep going there. And I wanted you to see, there you go. That's an actual picture of two of the guys. It is an iconic scene throughout Israel. Their actual Ministry of Tourism has had this for years. It has a modern version now, you can't even tell. And I had a guy in my church in San Diego, and his dad was actually an amazing sculpture, and he has famous sculptures all over the world, but he did out of marble and all of this. But he learned it. His son learned it. And not that his son did that. And so I was putting a mantle over my fireplace in my office there. And it was a very large fireplace, very large mantle. And he put all of these scenes of the Bible in there. And right at the very front, it's where he made the scene of this, the two guys. It's just very inspiring scene to see these giant grapes. Now you say, well, why there next to Hebron, the valley of Eshcol, did they have giant grapes? They had giants. Right? Giants need giant food. And so it worked out that way. And I think you can keep going to the pictures there. And then and so that's what it was. So we're gonna, what's that? So let's go back a little bit on the maps. I did the best I could. Like I said, there's a lot of maps here. So here we are. Yeah, there we go. So the wilderness of Sin, Kadesh Barnea, and they went up to Harod, to Hebron. Here's the valley of Eshcol. And then they went up to Bethel. That's a very sacred place. Keep going. And then from Beth-shan, there's Shechem, Beth-shan. Now we're at the Sea of Galilee. And there's Hazor, and then Rehob, which, again, is way past. This is where the line would be for the boundaries of Israel. This is up in Syria at this point. So, again, I put a lot of maps together. And if I had one good one, I'd just have one map up there, but I couldn't find it. I asked all kinds of pastors, and they all sent me stuff that was as bad as what I was finding. But you remember the Anak. They were surprised. They came back, and they said, these aren't mythical creatures. You know, there really are giants there. And they have giant cities with giant gates and giant walls. And we were surprised at that. It's interesting, in the last few years, they found some archaeological finds. One guy out in the middle of his olive orchard uncovered all of these swords. And it's the area where David used to own the land. And there was some giant swords that only giants could have used. They're in a museum there, not the main one in Jerusalem, but one of the guy basically set up his own museum, and he's doing pretty well there. But remember back in Genesis 6, this is back before the flood. It came to pass, this is where the giants started, when the men began to multiply in the face of the earth, that daughters were born to them. That is, the sons of God. That term is used elsewhere for angels, and it is referring to the angels, I believe. They saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. And the Lord said, in verse 3, my spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants on the earth in those days, and notice the next three words, and also afterwards. So that seed that came from the fallen angels through women, it evidently, as it said, maintained. Now, whether the angels had relations with women again and did that, I don't know. Jude talks about how they who passed those boundaries were locked up, those spirits, and they were held there. It appears, most believe, in Revelation, the monsters that are unlocked and come out of the pit are these grotesque angels, that their wicked ways and their wicked passing the boundaries has made them monstrous in their look, and they were released on the earth to cause harm to those who were following the beast. And so there's a lot on this subject, but I wanted you to see that after and also afterwards, in verse 4, then the sons of God came to the daughters of men, and they bore children to them, and those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. And the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of his thoughts of his heart were also evil continually. There's a lot going in. I studied on that in detail. Later in Deuteronomy 9:2, the people great and tall, the descendants of Anakim, so Anak or Anakim, whom you know and of whom you heard, who can stand before the descendants of Anak. That's what you guys said. There's no way anybody could defeat those guys in battle. And then Joshua in chapter 11, verse 20 and 21 and 22. And at that time Joshua came and cut off the Anakim from the mountains, from the Hebron and Debir and Anab and the mountains of Judah and from all of the mountains of Israel. Joshua utterly destroyed them and their cities. None of the Anakim that were left in the land of the children of Israel. They remained only in, where? Gaza and Gath and Ashdod, where the Philistines would settle sometime later, where Goliath and all his brothers lived. So right here, going back, let's go back a couple of maps. So right here is Hebron. So this would be Jerusalem, about right here where it says Bethel. Jerusalem would be about right here. And all of those areas are right here, right down here at the end. So if you go about the end of the Dead Sea and over, and all along the ocean here is where those places are. And this would be about where Sodom and Gomorrah was, right there in that area, by the way. Just the extra credit on that. And so, so you know the story about David killed Goliath, right? You remember that story? And he had the heart of Caleb and Joseph. We're going to find out, right? Did Caleb and Joseph have any fear of those giants? We're going to find out. Nope, not at all. Nor did David. Everybody else did, even the biggest guys like Saul. But do you know the story about when David's life almost ended by a giant killing him? A lot of people, that story sort of escapes them. It's found in 2 Samuel 21. You know David and Goliath's story in chapter 17. But many years, David's in his 60s now. And in verse 15 to 22 of 2 Samuel 21, when the Philistines were at war in Israel, David and his servants were with him, went down and fought against the Philistines, and David grew faint. That was unusual. He could run down those hills, run up those hills like a gazelle and never get tired. But they haven't fought in a while, and it's a little surprising. He's out of battle readiness. And Ishbi-Benob, who was one of the sons of the giant, the weight of whose bronze spear was 300 shekels, who was bearing a new sword, and thought he could kill David. Boy, that would be quite the price. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, came to his aid and struck the Philistine and killed him. And if you do the math, he's either the same age as David or older. So David, sitting around the throne, got himself out of shape. And then the men swore to him. The men of David swore to him, to David, saying, "You shall go out no more with us to battle, lest you quench the lamp of Israel." Verse 18. Now it happens after that there again was a battle with the Philistines at Kob. Then Shibbekai, the Hushathite, killed Zaph, who was one of the sons of the giant. And there was a war at Gob with the Philistines, where Elhan, the son of Jeri-Orjam, the Bethlehemite, killed the brother of Goliath the Gittite, and the shaft whose spear was like a weaver's beam. Yet again there was war at Gath. And there was a man of great stature who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in number. And he also was born to the giant. So he wasn't a giant, But he was a freakishly scary-looking guy and a very strong guy, a very great warrior. Wasn't a giant. He was the squirt of the family, but he was still somebody to be reckoned with. So when he defied Israel, Jonathan, the son of Shemaiah, David's brother, killed him. His own brother killed this giant. These 4 were born to the giants of Gath. They were his brothers. And they fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants. So, that giant issue was a giant problem, and it took them a while to finally end that giant problem right there in Gaza. You know, Gaza has no problems today. They got giant terrorists there now, not in size, but in hatred. So they traveled about 250 miles in total over 40 days. So they had a very long vacation, I guess, or trip to go spy out the land. And so again, you can see the journey with the maps. And I wanted to take this map here. So here's Ramesses or Tanis, where I was telling you about it's like the Zoar is there. This is where most people think they went, and they came across here, and this is where the Sinai Peninsula is, and they think Mount Sinai there. Some people think that. Other people think it's over here, and we've covered this. And then they went across the Red Sea. And so we're going to cover here. Let's see, is this the 12 tribes? No. So this is the problem, is every map wants to show you which way the children of Israel went. They went up here, came back down, traveled around, went up here, had some battles. We're going to do all this in Numbers. They're going to make it up to here. Mount Nebo, that's Moses, where he was able to look over into the Promised Land, across the Dead Sea. And that's one of the final moments. And then here, they finally, after 40 years, are going to enter into the Promised Land. Right there, sort of even with Jerusalem, very close to it there. And they're going to come across the Jordan River at Jericho. So that's what we'll see later. But I just want to show you as many maps so you can get familiar with this, because we're going to be covering this quite a bit. And the maps I showed earlier to you, and the locations the best I could. Not all of them are well known. And so I gave you a lot of maps you can go through there. Did you see the map did you see the picture where everybody was excited? Anyway, we'll see that one in a minute. In verse 26 to 29, now they departed and came back to Moses and Aaron and all the congregation of the children of Israel in the wilderness of Paran and Kadesh. This must have been an extraordinary time. They're back. And they brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him and said, we went to the land where you sent us. It truly flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. These giant grapes, I don't know. I think they were really big, size of a baseball or something. Nevertheless, the people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw, this is going to be the 3 words that get them, the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land. That would be distant relatives of Esau that came up, and they were a violent people. And the Amalekites came in the land of south, and then the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites and dwell in the mountains up there, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea along the banks of the Jordan. So wherever you turn, there's camps. Wherever you turn, there's walled cities. Wherever you turn, there's a massive amount of soldiers there. They're in the mountains, they're in the valley, they're by the rivers, they're by the sea. Wherever you go, this land is sardined with people, was the idea. So it's not a matter of taking out one city and then you get the land. There's a lot going on here. And so it tells us that they saw. It's interesting if you think about the eye gate and the ear gate. But as you go through the Bible, you'll find that when men see, they seem to get tempted and fall. Eve saw the fruit was good for food and saw that it would make one wise. How did she see this fruit to make her wise? But again, as we go through the Bible, hear the word of the Lord. Hide God's word in your heart. The Bible doesn't say to read it. It says meditate on it. I think a lot of people don't get the word from their head into their heart because they don't meditate on it. And then the voice of one crying in a wilderness. It wasn't a person to see. It was a voice to listen to. And the word became flesh and dwelt among us. And the word was God. And the word was God, and the word is God, and all things have been created through him. And so as you go through, it's the ear gates that God seems to produce faith in the heart. But when the children of Israel see stuff, it didn't really help them. Now just think about it. The largest, most powerful, richest nation known to man in that part of the world at that time was Egypt. You would go for miles and days' journey and still be inside Egypt with giant walls. And of course, we know about the pyramids and all of these things and their great military and the money and the surplus. God took care of them. Not one bow and arrow, not one sword. He took care of them and humbled them and broke them. And they finally sent out Israel with wealth. But now, all of a sudden, we got our giants. How is that? We got Amalekites and Amorites. And, there's that statement that says, God's past faithfulness demands our current trust in him. But think about children of Israel. When they saw the miracles in Egypt, did it help their faith? Nope. They come down to the Red Sea, and what happens? No faith. They walk across on dry ground. Boy, they have a rejoicing time. Miriam's lead them. They're all singing songs. 3 days later, they're ready to kill Moses because there's no water. Seeing those great miracles did not give them a heart of faith. And here again, they're saying we saw this for ourselves with our eyes. But you'll notice here that in the 10 spies who spoke, in their description of the land, they never mentioned God once. But Joseph and Caleb, when they give their story, they mention God several times. And so we know in 2 Corinthians 5:7, we walk by faith, not by what? Sight. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things what? Not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good testimony. Everybody who's in the Hall of Faith did it by faith, and they didn't see it. It didn't seem possible. When God spoke it, and he made the impossible possible, and they knew it was going to happen. They weren't surprised. In 1 John 4:4, you are of God, little children, have overcome them, because he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. One of my favorite verses in Isaiah 54:17, no weapons formed against you shall prosper. Every tongue rises against you in judgment, you shall condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord. Their righteousness is from me, says the Lord. And then Jeremiah 33:3, call unto me, and I will answer you and show you great and mighty things which you do not know. Well, quickly here in verse 30, then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome it. Woo! People didn't appreciate it, did it? I think Paul had the same spirit in Romans 3:4. Certainly not. Indeed, let God be true and every man a liar, as is written, that you may be justified in your words and may overcome them in your judgment. So again here, he's like, this is nothing. In verse 31 and 33 there, but the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. So I think the spies thought all 12 of them were going to give the same story and somehow give this impossible quandrum to Moses and God with plan B or something. They were not appreciative that these two young men broke rank. They were not happy about this. And so they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone as spies is a land that, now notice the exaggeration, devours its inhabitants. All 12 of you are here. All the people whom you saw are men, are of great stature. They saw the giants, the descendants of the Anak, who came from the giants, all the way back to the Nephilim. They got us history. And we were grasshoppers in our own sight. Well, yeah, they got that part right, didn't they? And we were in their sight. Ooh, they got a glimpse of them, evidently. I love Isaiah 40. No doubt this is for this occasion. In Isaiah 40, verse 21, it says, have you not known? Have you not heard? Has it not been told to you from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like what? Grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. Total exaggeration. They might have looked like children compared to the giants, but not grasshoppers. They weren't that big. That was a total exaggeration. Interesting, next chapter, they are going to actually say, why, chapter 14, verse 3, why has the Lord brought us up to this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should become victims? Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt? And God has something to say about that. And it would not be the giants that devour them, but their foolishness that did devour their wives and their children. Well, there is a lot of lessons in here, and it's really sort of put a pin in it because you don't really fully understand it until chapters 14 and 15, right? And then just some amazing stories to glean from there.